The truck engine roared to life, and my son David slammed it into reverse. His face was twisted with something I'd never seen before. Not just anger, but cold calculation. He leaned out the window and screamed at me with pure hatred. "Enjoy meeting the bear, Mom." I stood frozen between the pine trees, watching my own son speed away into the growing darkness. The red taillights bounced and weaved down the narrow forest path, getting smaller and smaller until they disappeared completely behind the thick wall of trees. Then silence. The kind of silence that comes when you realize someone you love has just tried to kill you. I adjusted my wire-rimmed glasses with shaking hands and looked around. Here I was, 70 years old, 15 miles deep in the wilderness with no supplies, no phone signal, and night falling fast. David had planned this perfectly. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't some angry outburst. This was murder. Premeditated, calculated murder. My own son had brought me out here to die so he could inherit my money. I pulled out my old flip phone with trembling fingers. No signal, just like David knew there wouldn't be. He had researched this location carefully, picked the most remote spot possible. "You clever, evil boy," I whispered to myself. The camping gear was in the truck. The food was in the truck. My warm jacket and emergency supplies were driving away with the man who had just sentenced me to death in the wilderness. But David had made one crucial mistake. He thought I was just a helpless old woman with a bank account worth killing for. He had no idea what his mother was really capable of. I started walking in the direction the truck had gone, my hiking boots crunching on dead leaves. My arthritis screamed in protest, but I ignored the pain. I had survived 70 years on this earth, including 30 years as a rural nurse and decades of wilderness camping. I wasn't going to die tonight. Not for David's gambling debts. The fight earlier had revealed everything. David owed money to dangerous people. His divorce was costing him a fortune. His credit cards were maxed out, his house was in foreclosure, and loan sharks were threatening to break his legs. "Just sign the papers, Mom," he had begged at first. "Make me the beneficiary on everything. You know I'll take care of you." When I refused, his mask had slipped completely. "You're going to die soon anyway," he had screamed, grabbing my shoulders. "Why should that money sit in the bank when I need it now, when I'm drowning?" That's when I understood. David hadn't brought me camping to bond. He had brought me here to murder me and make it look like an accident. A 70-year-old woman, lost in the woods, found dead days later from exposure. So tragic. So believable. And David would inherit my $300,000 in savings, plus my house, plus my life insurance policy. Enough money to pay off his debts and start over. All he had to do was let his mother die alone in the forest. But as I walked deeper into the darkness, I heard something that made me stop cold. A low mechanical humming sound, like machinery running somewhere in the distance. I frowned. There shouldn't be any machines running out here. David had chosen this spot specifically because it was completely isolated, unless someone else was using these woods for something they shouldn't be doing. I followed the sound, moving carefully through the thick underbrush. After 50 years of camping, I knew these forests better than David realized. The humming got louder as I walked deeper into the trees. Suddenly, the sound stopped. I stood perfectly still and listened. The forest was too quiet now. Even the night birds had gone silent. That's when I heard heavy footsteps moving through the forest, coming straight toward me. 3 days earlier, I had been so excited about our camping trip. I thought I was being a good mother, reaching out to help my son through his troubles. How wrong I was. I remember standing in my kitchen that Tuesday morning, packing sandwiches and trail mix into a cooler. David had called the night before, his voice shaky and desperate. "Mom, I really need to talk to you," he had said. "Away from everything. Just you and me, like when I was a kid." My heart had melted. David rarely wanted to spend time with me anymore. Since his father died 5 years ago, our relationship had grown cold and distant. I thought maybe this camping trip could bring us closer again. I should have noticed the warning signs. David arrived at my house that morning looking terrible. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes were bloodshot, and his hands wouldn't stop shaking. When I hugged him, I could smell alcohol on his breath, even though it was only 9 in the morning. "Are you okay, honey?" I asked, studying his face with my nurse's eye for detail. "I'm fine, Mom. Just tired. Work has been crazy." But David hadn't worked in 3 months. I knew that because his neighbor Mrs. Peterson had mentioned seeing him home during the day, pacing around his yard and talking loudly on his phone. I made him coffee and breakfast, watching as he barely touched the food. His phone kept buzzing with text messages, and each time it did, his face would go pale. "David, what's really going on?" I asked gently. "You can tell me anything." That's when he broke down. "I'm in trouble, Mom. Big trouble." Tears started rolling down his cheeks. "I owe people money. A lot of money." "How much money?" $80,000. I nearly dropped my coffee cup. 80,000? How is that possible? "Gambling," he whispered. "Online poker, sports betting, casino trips. It started small after Dad died. I was just trying to feel something, you know? But then I kept losing, and I kept betting more to try to win it back." My heart broke for him. I knew David had been struggling since his father's death, but I had no idea it was this bad. "And there's more," he continued. "Sarah's divorce lawyer is asking for half of everything. The house, my retirement account, even Dad's old truck. She wants alimony too." "Oh, David. The people I owe money to aren't patient, Mom. They've been calling me every day. Yesterday, 2 men showed up at my house. They said if I don't pay by Friday, they're going to hurt me." I reached across the table and took his hand. "We'll figure this out together. I have some savings. Maybe I can help." David's eyes lit up with hope. "Really? You'd do that?" "Of course. You're my son." But then something strange happened. David's expression changed. The desperate, grateful look disappeared, replaced by something calculating. "How much do you have saved, Mom?" "Well, I don't know the exact amount off the top of my head. Roughly. Maybe 300,000, plus the house and my life insurance policy." David went very quiet. I could practically see the wheels turning in his head. "That would solve everything," he said slowly. "All my problems would just disappear. I can't give you all of it, David. I need money to live on, but I can help with some of it." "Some of it won't be enough," he snapped, then caught himself. "I mean, these people want everything. They don't negotiate." That's when he suggested the camping trip. "Let's go to that place Dad used to take us," he said. "Up in the northern forest. We can talk about everything without distractions. Figure out a plan." I was so touched that he wanted to visit our old family camping spot. I thought it meant he was ready to heal, to reconnect with good memories of his father. I spent the next 2 days getting ready, buying supplies, planning meals. I even dug out our old camping photos to bring along, thinking we could look through them together. I never suspected that David was planning something entirely different. I never imagined that my son was researching the most remote, dangerous parts of the forest. I never thought he was planning to leave me there to die. But now, walking through the dark woods with strange mechanical sounds echoing around me, I understood the truth. David hadn't brought me here to talk. He had brought me here to kill me. The footsteps were getting closer, and I knew I had to move. Fast. I slipped behind a massive oak tree, pressing my back against the rough bark. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure whoever was out there could hear it. The mechanical humming had stopped completely, but those heavy boots kept crunching through the dead leaves. I held my breath and waited. A beam of flashlight swept past my hiding spot, then moved on. I caught a glimpse of a tall figure in dark clothing, but couldn't make out any details. The person was searching for something, or someone. After what felt like forever, the footsteps moved away, heading deeper into the forest. I waited another 10 minutes before I dared to move. My nurse's training kicked in. Stay calm, assess the situation, make a plan. First, I needed to figure out where I was exactly. David had driven us deep into the northern section of the state forest, but I remembered passing several landmarks on the way in. If I could find the old logging road that ran east-west through this area, I could follow it back toward civilization. But first, I needed to investigate that mechanical sound. Something was very wrong here, and my instincts told me it was important. I pulled out my small flashlight, the one I always kept in my jacket pocket that David didn't know about. The beam was weak, but it was better than stumbling around in complete darkness. Following the direction where I'd heard the humming, I moved carefully through the underbrush. My arthritis was screaming, but I'd dealt with worse pain during my nursing career. Broken bones, difficult births, emergency surgeries in remote locations. This was just another challenge to overcome. After about 15 minutes of careful walking, I smelled something that made me stop cold. Gasoline. And something else. Something chemical and sharp. I clicked off my flashlight and crept forward in the darkness. Through the trees ahead, I could see a faint glow of light. What I found made my blood run cold. Hidden in a small clearing was a cabin that shouldn't exist. This was protected wilderness land. No structures were allowed here. But someone had built this place anyway, and they'd gone to great lengths to hide it. The cabin was painted dark green to blend with the forest. Solar panels on the roof explained the electricity, and parked behind it were 2 pickup trucks and what looked like a small trailer. Through the windows, I could see people moving around inside, at least 3 or 4 figures. I crept closer, staying low behind a fallen log. My old bones protested, but I ignored them. 40 years of nursing had taught me how to move quietly when checking on sleeping patients. That's when I saw what was in the trailer. Large plastic containers, dozens of them. And the chemical smell was much stronger here. My stomach dropped as I realized what I was looking at. This wasn't just some illegal cabin. This was a drug lab, a meth lab, hidden deep in the forest where no one would think to look. I fumbled for my phone, hoping against hope that I might have gotten some signal. Nothing. Still completely dead. But I had to document this somehow. I switched my phone to camera mode and carefully took several photos, even though I couldn't see how clear they were in the darkness. At least I'd have some evidence. That's when I heard voices from inside the cabin. Should be back by now. Told you this location was too risky. If anyone finds this place, I couldn't make out everything they were saying, but the tone was clear. These people were nervous about something, and they were definitely not supposed to be here. I started to back away, planning to find that logging road and get to the authorities as quickly as possible. But as I turned to leave, my foot caught on a branch. The snap echoed through the quiet forest like a gunshot. The voices inside the cabin stopped immediately. What was that? Someone's out there. Get the lights. Suddenly, the clearing was flooded with bright spotlights. I was completely exposed, crouched behind the fallen log like a deer caught in headlights. Hey, you! Don't move! I did the only thing I could do. I ran. My 70-year-old legs carried me faster than they had in years, crashing through bushes and jumping over roots. Behind me, I could hear shouting and the sound of people giving chase. Find her! She can't have gone far! An old lady! How did an old lady get out here? I knew these woods better than they did. That was my only advantage. But I also knew that if they caught me, I wouldn't be walking out of this forest alive. David had tried to kill me for money. Now these criminals might finish the job for free. I ran through the forest like my life depended on it because it did. Behind me, I could hear them crashing through the underbrush, their flashlight beams sweeping back and forth like angry searchlights. They were younger and stronger, but I had something they didn't. 50 years of experience in these woods. She went this way. Spread out. Check every tree. We can't let her get away. My lungs burned and my arthritic knees screamed with every step, but I kept moving. I knew exactly where I was going. About half a mile east of the drug lab was an old deer trail that connected to the abandoned logging road. If I could reach it, I could follow it all the way back to the main highway. The problem was getting there alive. I ducked under a low branch and changed direction, heading toward a rocky outcrop I remembered from childhood camping trips. The rocks would muffle my footsteps and give me a chance to catch my breath. As I climbed over the boulders, I heard one of them shout, "Lost her! She's gone!" "Keep looking! An old woman can't just disappear!" But that's exactly what I had done. I pressed myself against the cold stone and waited, controlling my breathing the way I'd learned during those long night shifts in the emergency room. Stay calm. Think clearly. Survive. After 10 minutes, their voices faded as they searched in the wrong direction. I carefully climbed down from the rocks and found the deer trail. It was overgrown and barely visible, but my feet remembered the path. As I walked, my mind raced with everything I'd discovered. David hadn't just tried to murder me, he'd unknowingly led those criminals right to me. They'd seen our truck drive past their operation. They probably thought I was some kind of witness who needed to be silenced. The irony was bitter. My son had tried to kill me for my money, and now I might die anyway because of his choice of location, but I wasn't dead yet. The logging road appeared ahead of me like a gift from heaven. It was wider than the deer trail, and much easier to follow in the darkness. I turned east and started the long walk towards civilization. My phone still had no signal, but I kept checking every few minutes. I needed to reach the authorities before those criminals could pack up and disappear. And I needed to reach them before David could complete whatever story he was planning to tell about my accidental death. As I walked, I thought about what David was probably doing right now. He'd driven home, parked the truck in his garage, and was probably rehearsing his lies. Tomorrow morning, he'd call the police with a tearful story about how his elderly mother had wandered away from their campsite and gotten lost in the woods. "She's been having memory problems," he'd tell them. "I woke up and she was just gone. I searched for hours but couldn't find her." The search teams would eventually find my body, if the bears and coyotes left anything to find. David would inherit everything. My house, my savings, my life insurance. All his debts would disappear, and he'd be free to start over. Except I wasn't going to die in these woods. After what felt like hours of walking, I finally saw something beautiful ahead of me. Streetlights. The logging road connected to Highway 47 about 2 miles from the nearest town. I pulled out my phone and nearly cried with relief. 2 bars of signal. My hands shook as I dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? This is Margaret Thompson. I need to report a drug operation in the state forest and an attempted murder. Ma'am, did you say attempted murder? Yes. My son, David Thompson, tried to kill me by abandoning me in the wilderness. And there's a meth lab hidden about 15 miles north of Highway 47. I have photos. Ma'am, where are you now? I'm on Highway 47, about 2 miles east of Millerville. I need someone to pick me up immediately. We're sending units to your location now. Are you injured? No, but I'm 70 years old and I've been walking through the forest all night. And officer, when you send someone to arrest my son, you might want to check his house. He's probably in the middle of filing a false missing person report. There was a pause on the other end. Ma'am, we'll have someone there in 10 minutes. Stay on the line with me. As I waited for the police, I thought about David sitting at home, probably practicing his grief-stricken act in the mirror. He had no idea that his mother was not only alive, but coming home with evidence that would destroy his life. I smiled grimly in the darkness. David wanted a surprise? He was about to get one. The police cruiser's headlights cut through the darkness as it pulled up beside me on Highway 47. I had never been so happy to see flashing red and blue lights in my entire life. A young female officer stepped out of the car, her hand resting cautiously on her weapon. Ma'am, are you Margaret Thompson? Yes, I am. My voice was hoarse from the cold night air and exhaustion. I'm Officer Sarah Mitchell. Are you hurt? Do you need medical attention? I'm fine, just tired and cold. But we need to move fast. There are dangerous people in those woods, and my son thinks I'm dead. Officer Mitchell helped me into the warm patrol car and handed me a thermos of coffee. The hot liquid felt like heaven as it warmed my throat. Mrs. Thompson, I need you to start from the beginning. You said your son tried to kill you? As we drove toward town, I told her everything. David's gambling debts, his desperate financial situation, how he'd planned this camping trip specifically to murder me and make it look accidental. I showed her the photos I'd taken of the drug lab, though they were dark and blurry. Officer Mitchell listened without interrupting, but I could see her expression growing more serious with every detail. Mrs. Thompson, I have to ask, are you absolutely certain your son intended to kill you? Sometimes family arguments can escalate, and people say things they don't mean. Officer Mitchell, I've been a nurse for 40 years. I know the difference between an angry outburst and premeditated murder. David researched that location specifically. He knew there was no cell service. He knew I'd be stranded with no supplies. He left me there to die so he could inherit my money. She nodded slowly. And you're sure about the drug lab? Positive. I saw at least 4 people, multiple vehicles, and what looked like a meth operation. They chased me through the woods when they realized I'd seen them. Officer Mitchell picked up her radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I need backup units to meet me at the Thompson residence on Maple Street. Possible attempted murder and fraud in progress. Also need to contact the DEA about a suspected drug operation in the Northern Forest section. Copy that. Unit 47. Backup en route. As we pulled into my driveway, I saw David's truck parked in front of my house. The lights were on inside, and I could see him moving around in my living room. He's already here, I said grimly. Probably going through my papers, looking for insurance documents and bank information. Officer Mitchell called for additional backup before we approached the house. Within minutes, 2 more patrol cars arrived. Mrs. Thompson, I want you to stay in the car while we handle this. If your son really did try to kill you, he might become violent when he realizes his plan failed. Through my living room window, I watched as the officers knocked on my front door. David answered, and even from the car, I could see the shock on his face. He was clearly not expecting police to show up at my house. I saw him gesture frantically, probably spinning some story about his missing mother. One of the officers was taking notes while David talked. That's when Officer Mitchell made a hand signal, and I stepped out of the patrol car. David's face went completely white when he saw me walking up my own front steps, very much alive. "Hello, David," I said calmly. "Surprised to see me?" "Mom? What? How did you... I thought you were..." He couldn't finish the sentence. "You thought I was dead?" "Yes, I imagine you did. That was the plan, wasn't it?" "I don't know what you're talking about. I was just about to call the police to report you missing. You wandered away from our campsite and I couldn't find you anywhere." Officer Mitchell stepped forward. "Mr. Thompson, your mother has made some very serious accusations against you. She claims you deliberately abandoned her in the wilderness with the intent to cause her death. That's crazy. She's confused. She's been having memory problems lately. She must have gotten lost and..." "David," I interrupted. "I recorded our entire conversation on my phone before you left me there, including the part where you said I was going to die soon anyway and demanded I sign over my inheritance." The color drained completely from his face. "You also might be interested to know," Officer Mitchell added, "that your mother discovered a major drug operation while she was surviving in the woods you left her in. The DEA is very grateful for her information." David's legs seemed to give out, and he sank down onto my porch steps. "Mom, please, I can explain everything. I was desperate. The people I owe money to, they were going to kill me. So you decided to kill me instead." For the first time in my life, I saw my son for exactly what he had become. A man who would murder his own mother for money. "David Thompson, you're under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit fraud." Officer Mitchell's words hung in the cold night air as she pulled out her handcuffs. David sat on my porch steps, his head in his hands, looking like a broken man. "Wait," I said, holding up my hand. "Before you arrest him, I want to show him something." Officer Mitchell looked uncertain. "Mrs. Thompson, I don't think that's advisable. He's dangerous. He's also my son, and I have something he needs to see." I walked past David into my own house, the house he'd planned to inherit after my death. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it 3 days ago, except for one thing. My desk drawers were open and papers were scattered across the dining room table. "Looking for my will, David?" I asked. "My insurance policies? Bank statements?" David couldn't meet my eyes. Mom, please, let me explain. Oh, I think you've explained enough. I picked up my phone and scrolled to the voice recording I'd made during our fight in the forest. Would you like to hear yourself again? The part where you said I was going to die soon anyway? I pressed play, and David's voice filled the room, angry and desperate. You're going to die soon anyway. Why can't you just give me what's mine? When I'm drowning. David flinched as if I'd slapped him. Or maybe you'd prefer to hear the part where you grabbed my shoulders and shook me? I scrolled to another recording. The part where you said the money should be yours because you need it now? Stop, David whispered. Please stop. But here's my favorite part, David. I found the final recording, the one I'd made right before he abandoned me. Listen to this. His voice came through the phone speaker, cold and calculating. I'm sorry it has to be this way, Mom, but I don't have a choice. Those people will kill me if I don't pay them. At least this way your death will mean something. Officer Mitchell's expression hardened. Mr. Thompson, that's a clear confession to premeditated murder. David looked up at me with tears in his eyes. How did you record all that? I'm not as helpless as you thought, am I? I've been recording our conversations for weeks, David, ever since you started asking strange questions about my finances and my health. A mother knows when her son is planning something. You knew? I suspected. I hoped I was wrong. I sat down across from him, suddenly feeling every one of my 70 years. David, I would have helped you. If you'd just been honest with me about your debts, we could have worked something out. You said you couldn't give me all of it, because I thought you needed maybe $10,000 or $20,000. I had no idea you owed $80,000. If you'd told me the truth, shown me the threats from those loan sharks, I would have found a way to help you. David's face crumpled. I was so scared, Mom. They said they'd break my legs. They said they'd hurt Sarah and the kids too, even though we're getting divorced. So you decided to hurt me instead. I thought it would be quick, that you'd just get lost and it would be over fast. I didn't want you to suffer. Officer Mitchell stepped forward. Mr. Thompson, anything you say can and will be used against you in court. I know. David looked at me with desperate eyes. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never wanted it to come to this. But it did come to this, David. You drove me 15 miles into the wilderness and left me there to die. You came back here and started going through my personal papers, planning to claim my inheritance. You were going to file a false police report tomorrow morning, weren't you? He nodded miserably. And here's the surprise I mentioned, son. I pulled out a manila envelope from my desk drawer. I changed my will last month, after I started suspecting what you were planning. David's eyes widened. What? You're no longer my beneficiary, David. I've left everything to the local hospital and the Girl Scout Council. You know, organizations that actually help people instead of trying to murder them. The look of shock and horror on his face was almost satisfying. But Mom, my debts, those people... That's your problem now, isn't it? You made your choice when you left me in those woods. Officer Mitchell stepped forward with the handcuffs. David Thompson, you have the right to remain silent. As they led my son away in handcuffs, I realized something. For the first time in months, I felt completely safe in my own home. 6 months later, I sat in the courthouse watching my son being sentenced to 15 years in prison for attempted murder and fraud. The judge's voice was stern and unforgiving. Mr. Thompson, you planned and executed an attempt to murder your own mother for financial gain. This court finds your actions particularly heinous given the victim's age and her trust in you as her son. David stood in his orange jumpsuit, looking nothing like the man who had driven me into those woods. Prison had aged him. His hair was graying, his face was gaunt, and his shoulders were permanently slumped in defeat. He turned to look at me one last time before they led him away. I saw regret in his eyes, but I also saw something else. Resentment. Even now, even after everything, part of him still blamed me for his situation. That's when I knew I had made the right decision. After the sentencing, Officer Mitchell, Now, Detective Mitchell, after her promotion for breaking up the drug ring, walked me to my car. "How are you holding up, Mrs. Thompson?" "I'm fine, Sarah. Better than fine, actually." And I was. The past 6 months had been the most peaceful of my life since my husband died. No more worried phone calls about David's latest crisis. No more loan sharks calling my house looking for him. No more walking on eggshells, wondering what desperate thing he might do next. "Have you heard anything about the drug operation?" I asked. All 4 suspects were convicted. Turns out they'd been using that location for almost 2 years. Your photos and testimony were crucial evidence. The DEA said you probably prevented millions of dollars worth of drugs from hitting the streets. Good. At least something positive came out of that nightmare. Detective Mitchell smiled. "You know, Mrs. Thompson, we could use someone with your observational skills and wilderness knowledge. Ever think about becoming a volunteer with our search and rescue team?" I laughed. "At my age is just a number. You survived a night in the wilderness that would have killed most people half your age. You uncovered a major criminal operation, and you had the courage to testify against your own son. That takes a special kind of strength." As I drove home, I thought about her offer. Maybe it was time to start a new chapter in my life. I had always helped people as a nurse. Maybe now I could help them in a different way. My house felt different when I walked inside. Lighter somehow. All of David's belongings were gone. I'd donated them to charity after his arrest. The papers he'd scattered across my dining room table had been organized and filed away. Everything was exactly as I wanted it. I made myself a cup of tea and sat down at my kitchen table with the stack of letters that had been arriving for months. Thank you notes from the families of people who had been saved when the drug operation was shut down. Letters from other elderly people who had heard my story and found the courage to report their own abusive family members. One letter in particular caught my attention. It was from a woman named Helen, whose grandson had been stealing her medication and selling it. "Your story gave me the strength to call the police," she wrote. "I thought I had to protect him because he was family, but you showed me that sometimes protecting ourselves is more important than protecting people who want to hurt us." I smiled and added her letter to the growing pile. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. I almost didn't answer it. Old habits from the months when David's creditors were constantly calling. But the caller ID showed it was my neighbor, Mrs. Peterson. "Margaret, dear, I hope you don't mind me calling. I was wondering if you'd like to join me and some of the other ladies for dinner tomorrow night. We're trying that new restaurant downtown." "I'd love to," I said, and meant it. After I hung up, I walked to my bedroom and opened the closet. In the back, behind my winter coats, was my old camping gear. The sleeping bag I'd used for decades of Girl Scout trips. The hiking boots that had carried me through countless wilderness adventures. Detective Mitchell was right. Age was just a number, and I wasn't done living yet. I pulled out my camping gear and spread it on the bed. Tomorrow, I would call Detective Mitchell and volunteer for the search and rescue team. David had tried to end my story in those dark woods. Instead, he had given me a new beginning.